Is everything getting worse? I've seen that a lot online on social media, on YouTube. It's definitely a popular topic, and it's something I've noticed myself, is that everything from the products you buy to the service you get has been getting worse, of less quality, of less value, really, for what you're paying for it. The costs go up, but what you get goes down. And I think it is pretty noticeable, and it's definitely made me reconsider spending habits, lifestyle habits, probably for my own good, in fairness. But it's definitely made me reconsider some of those things. It's, some of these things are, if the hobby was a little cheaper, you might get more people into it. If, that product was a little cheaper, maybe I'd pick it up. But most of the time these days, it's hit the point where it's too expensive. I see this a lot in video games. Video games are where I noticed it first. And that's the $70 game is just too much money for what you get. And sure, you might get tons of hours in it, but there's nothing materially different from something that's from a $59.99 game. There's nothing really different from the $60 game, right? They went up $10 for no real reason, especially for these games where essentially they can just be bought. They can essentially just be bought by millions and millions of copies. You're telling me you had to raise the price $10 and you weren't offering anything better. Most of them require day one patches, whether that's for content or just to fix the game so it actually works. And I remember you used to be able to buy a game and just play it out of the box. It worked. Didn't require a day one patch. So they've definitely gotten worse and they've gotten more expensive. I think we saw it also with the new Switch console. The Switch 2 is very expensive. I know several friends who were interested in buying one, but held off because they just couldn't justify purchasing it. And most of the games, you just buy a code now or a cartridge, and then you have to download the game. And that's been true with several of the Switch games, is they do require an internet connection because you have to download the content. And that takes away some of the longevity of those, right? You can't come back in 10 years when the server's gone and replay that game. And if the game is a code instead of a physical cartridge, you can't resell the game. You can't buy it secondhand if it's a game you were kind of iffy on and decided, okay, I'll pick it up because it's $20 instead of $40 or whatever the cost would be. So I think that's definitely gotten worse because it used to be, that was GameStop's whole model for a while was they would buy games and sell them to you for way more money than you should have, but at least you could get some of those games well past after they were sold by retailers. Or maybe you got, a weird game that you've never heard of because somebody had sold it to them. Those had their problems as well, but I've also noticed it in services too, is you go to a restaurant and the service just isn't as good as it used to be. And that could be a ton of factors, but it definitely impacts things. A lot of those same places now have suggested tips starting at 18% is the lowest I've seen for the suggested tips. I went to one place where the minimum suggested tip was 25%. And it went up to 50%, which was just absurd. And I've only seen that in one place, so I don't think that's very widespread. Everywhere has those suggested tips now, even for, a place where go to a counter, you order, and then you collect your order and go sit down. There's no service. There's nothing to tip on. And so, just the fact that that's there, it's this omnipresent, just slight worsening of the experience. And it's also like that with computer operating systems, right? Windows 11, a lot of people don't want it, but they killed Windows 10. Windows 11 seems bad enough. I've had to use it on one computer, and it's bad enough when Windows 10 is fully gone. If you missed it, there was a way to extend the Windows 10 security updates, which I did. But when that's done, I'll probably have to switch over to Linux or a Mac. I'm not entirely sure which, but may have to. And so that's not great, right? Windows has gotten worse. I remember you used to be able to buy Microsoft Office. And it's been a long time, but you used to be able to buy a copy. You didn't have to keep buying the subscription. Same for Adobe, right? Photoshop. I know people who use that where now it's a subscription based. The nice thing with that is there are some alternatives that are available. They aren't quite as good in some ways, but they are purchasable, right? You can buy a license for it and then you don't have to keep paying a fee for it. It definitely, I think the worsening started in software and it's just kind of spread from there. Products you buy don't last as long. I know people who've had to go through refrigerators pretty regularly. I have a refrigerator that came with my place that I think is 20 years old at this point. I'm not entirely sure based off the style. It's probably 20 years old. I could probably look. But, it's lasted a long time. But new fridges 5 years, maybe you got to replace them. I'll admit the fridge I have isn't the most convenient, but it works, and I don't see any need to replace it. It's also big in cars. New cars have tons of problems. Is also super noticeable. A lot of them seem to have gone downhill, and everything seems to have gone downhill. And it's kind of affecting everything. And it's not just the dealing with that product. It's also the cost of what dealing with that product takes from you, right? If I got to spend money on fixing something that shouldn't have broken, right? Well, that's money I don't have to spend on something else. And it also, makes the quality of life a little worse. And when you extrapolate it out, okay, one thing breaks, all right, that's fine, you got to deal with it. But when everything is like that, it becomes a lot more difficult to spend money on things that aren't as important, particularly when those side things are either way more expensive than they should be, or they just don't work, right? I mean, right, that can be a huge issue for some of these things. It's right, if and sometimes the cost of something doesn't guarantee anymore that you're buying something a bit more quality. I don't think it ever really did, and there is definitely a point where a little extra upfront does make the whole experience a little better, right? If you're willing to spend a little more on not just cost, but also in time and researching what you're buying, you can buy some pretty nice stuff these days that will last a long time. But it does take a lot more work to do so. You can't just go down to your local store and just buy something off the rack. You have to actually go, okay, what do I need? I need this. Okay, where should I buy that from? Let me do some research. And it takes a lot more time, which prevents you from doing other things. And it's frustrating for you as the user. For instance, I just recently had to buy a new belt. My old one was falling apart, which was also a cheapo one that I bought for like $10. I kind of knew what I was getting, but the one I bought was $15, and it's about the same quality. It's probably going to last a year, and then it's going to fall apart. And it was like, well, I need one tomorrow, and I foolishly waited too long to go buy one. But there's also the sense that I shouldn't have had to wait to go buy one. I should be able to just go to a store and buy something that's going to last more than a year or 6 months. And so I do think things are getting worse, and I think when you find something that is good, honestly, these days it's probably worth buying multiples of it, but it is kind of more rare that those happen, right? Like the good dining experience, the really nice dining experience, is just seems much more out of reach, right? It's, it's just all these things kind of come together to give the impression that everything's just getting worse. And I think that's a real thing. I don't really have an answer for it other than when you do something, try to do it to the best you can. And where you fall short, make whatever changes you think are necessary to make it better, right? Offer the best service, and that's going to help you a lot. There's a lot you can do with just being somebody who's pleasant to work with. And that goes for corporate, but it also goes for if you work in anything, right? And it can be draining. I understand that. But it can definitely make a good name for you, especially if you have your own business. If you make it easy for customers to work with you, to buy from you, and you also make it a good experience and a good product, that can be very helpful. And there are some caveats to that, of course. You still have to deal with customers, and the whole experience has gotten worse. I will say, I know my experience is mostly from the customer side, but on the business side, the customers have gotten worse too. It's not just the businesses, it's everything. And that does make it more difficult. And I don't really have an answer. Unfortunately, I wish I did. I wish I could say, we should do this, and that would be an answer, but I don't. And to give you one would be disingenuous at best. So anyway, this was a less happy video than I thought it would be. I'd hoped to take this in a more positive direction, but, well, it just isn't, unfortunately. And so that is where I'll leave it for this week. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in the next one.